Hey my fellow Fuji lovers, in this video we're going to take a closer look at the Fujifilm XH2s and the XH2 to figure out the core differences between them, because I'm going to buy one or the other and I really don't want to make a mistake. We will look at the advantages and the disadvantages of the faster 26.1 megapixel stack sensor versus the highest resolution APS-C sensor that has ever been created at 40.2 megapixels. That's right, the idea that one of them is better at everything isn't actually the case. You think otherwise? Please just hear me out. But first, let's quickly cover what they have in common. Okay, let's start with the physical appearance. The body, including the viewfinder and the LCD screen, is virtually identical. Now, the LCD screen itself is actually exactly the same as we have on the XT4. The viewfinder has been improved a lot. The XT4 has 3.68 million dots with 100 frames per second refresh rate. Meanwhile, these new cameras have a much more detailed 5.76 million dot OLED electronic viewfinder with a larger magnification and a faster 120 frames per second refresh rate. In terms of weight, the XH2 and the XH2s weigh the same, 660 grams, and they're exactly 10% heavier than the XT4. We have the same always-on display on the top that gives us all the info we'll ever need, and it'll only take a glance to read it. It's well placed and easily accessible. Great upgrade. And finally, we have the infamous Basm Dial. A lot of people like to hate on it. Are you one of those people? I think it makes a life easier. By the way, I'm sure most of you know what it stands for, but if you don't, it's just the short for P for program mode, A for aperture priority, S for shutter priority, and M for manual mode. On the XT4, it wasn't so obvious what mode you were in. It was all like twists and turns. Now inside these bodies, we find the latest, much faster X Processor 5 engine in both cameras. And they have the exact same autofocusing system, which is 3 times faster than the XT4s. But do they have the same performance too? The short answer is no, but we'll get back to that later. And actually the same goes for the 5-axis IBIS, which will give us up to 7 stops of stabilization depending on the lens. They are not exactly the same on these cameras, and we'll get back to that. A lot of people seem to think that the XH2s is the better camera for videos due to its stack sensor having less rolling shutter distortion and more dynamic range. And the XH2 on the other hand is more of a photo-oriented camera because it has more megapixels. Well, it's not that simple. Okay, let's look at this a little bit closer. First of all, what is rolling shutter? How does it work? Why does it distort images? And how is the XH2s's fast readout speed affects it? Are you ready? When you shoot in videos, the camera is only using its electrical shutter. Now, there are different types of electrical shutter systems, for example, global, rolling, or GRR, but now we're not gonna get into that. Both of these cameras use a so-called rolling shutter. The main disadvantage of rolling shutter is that when you're capturing fast-moving subjects, they can become distorted. But why is that? We all know how physical shutter works, right? It's literally like a door that closes, opens up, and closes again super quickly, revealing the whole sensor while you capture an image. Rolling shutter, on the other hand, turns the sensor itself on and off to achieve the same result. But the issue is it does so line by line. And because it takes a while to get from the top of the sensor to the bottom, these pixel lines are exposed at different times. Put it this way, by the time the camera goes through this motion, the fast moving subjects will be in a different place, and this causes distortion. So then of course the faster the camera does this readout, the better the quality is going to be. The XH2s promises 4 times faster readout speed than the XT4, and it's actually just over twice as fast as the XH2, which is also excellent compared to the XT4. By the way, the mechanical shutter speed for stills is identical on the XT4, XH2 and the XH2s, 15 frames per second. Now just to put it in context, in my eyes the XT4 is already an amazing camera. Rolling shutter is rarely an issue, you kind of have to look for it. I'm not saying it's hard to find, but in most cases it's barely noticeable, and in my eyes it's not that important. Now both the XH2 and the XH2s will have a significantly better rolling shutter performance, and regardless of what we choose, that is an amazing news for us. And again, for videos we need to remember that the XH2 can shoot up to 8K at 30 frames per second. That's a hell of a lot of cropping ability. Meanwhile, the XH2s does 6.2K at 30 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second. The XH2 can also do 6.2K at 30, but it can only do 4K at 60 frames per second. Wow, we are getting a lot from both cameras. Now just remember, we'll probably have to upgrade our memory cards and our computers too if we want to work with these files, especially if we're shooting in higher bit rates. So both of these cameras offer a lot of new codecs, including H.265, Apple ProRes. You can record 10-bit internally or 12-bit via HDMI. There's no 30 minutes limitation, and if you worry about overheating, there is an optional cooling fan that you can attach to the back of both of these cameras. Okay, that's it for the video part. Let's look at stills now. So the S model again has the speed advantage when it comes to burst shooting, 40 frames per second without any crop. Meanwhile, the XH2 can only shoot up to 20 frames per second burst when using electrical shutter. Not sure if you remember, but the XT4 could shoot up to 30 frames per second with a 1.2 times crop. But don't forget, with the XH2, now we're getting 40.2 megapixels images, and that is a big difference, especially if you're after all that fine details in your pictures. There are 2 impressive specifications found only on the XH2. First, the possibility of using an electrical shutter speed as fast as 1/180,000th of a second. Fujifilm called this the special drive. Are they starting to name shit like Apple now? By comparison, the S model only goes up to 1/32,000th of a second, and the XH2 has this pixel shift multi-shot mode. For the first time on a Fuji camera, you can use multiple shots to create more resolution. What happens here is the XH2 takes 20 images in a row, moving the sensor by a half a pixel in between, and it creates a 160 megapixel image. That's huge. According to Fuji, this will work best with the camera on a tripod and no movements inside the scene. Sounds like a lens creeper's dream. There was a lot in there, right? I know, my head's spinning. Now let's look at the autofocus real quick. Fujifilm's claiming that the XH2s's autofocus system is 3 times faster than the one on the X-T4 and has better eye and face detection than the older model. Now, apparently the XH2s's autofocus is a little bit better than the XH2's, but the difference isn't huge. It's one of the most important upgrades in my eyes. I mean, that little square in my eyes. Low light performance is about the same. IBIS, I couldn't find anything convincing on this topic. Can you tell me why this could be the case? For some unexplainable reason, the XH2 has a visibly better stabilization. This has been confirmed by multiple sources. The reasons are unknown to me. Now this could be a software glitch for all we know, but that's what's up right now. So what is the final conclusion? Who should get what now? First of all, both of these cameras seems to be perfected on paper compared to the X-T4, which was already a great camera. Ask yourself this question: are you getting £600 worth of extra features with the XH2s? Is that rolling shutter and fast burst rate for stills that important to you? Or 8K 40 megapixels and a lot cheaper price is the winner? Let me know which camera would you go for. I am saving up like a madman to get the XH2. As always, thank you for watching, and if you appreciate the effort I put into this video, please like it and sub if you'd like to see more. Thank you. See you in the next one.